regard our daily tasks and our work as arenas of discipleship, then by definition, discipleship is something we do as a leisure time activity during the relatively small number of hours each week when we're not working. This is the Intersection Faith, Work, and Life podcast hosted by Bob Varney and myself, Hugh Brandt. The Intersection is committed to helping people see that discipleship means we live by faith in God in all arenas of our lives all the time. If you want to hear more discipleship stories of people living by faith in every sphere of their lives, please invite others to listen to the Intersection podcast. Welcome and thanks for listening today to learn how Lynn Johnson has responded to a problem she feels strongly about. Lynn Johnson is the president of All In Empowering Futures. This nonprofit agency focuses on driving international initiatives to empower communities, nonprofit agencies, faith-based organizations, government, and businesses to combat the crisis of children aging out of foster care systems, adoption, poverty, and human trafficking. She brings determination, passion, and a strong belief in the dignity of all people, no matter the challenge before them. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Lynn. And Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
It's good to have you here. Let me just begin, if I can, in a word of prayer.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Lord Jesus, we just thank you for Lynn. We thank you for the heart that she has for these folks that age out of foster care, and just the heart that she has for our nation. So we ask you to be with us this morning as we record this lovely time together. Be with us, fill us with your spirit, and allow that spirit to overflow into the words that we use. We thank you, and we ask your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
You know, Lynn, I haven't known you that long, but you have a fascinating life, and we're eager to hear about yourself, but your journey. Can you tell us about your spiritual journey in life?
Absolutely. I don't ever remember not having a spiritual journey in life, but I've been married to my husband, Lance, for 41 years. He's my rock. He's my foundation. And that lifts up a spiritual life as you move forward, raising kids. We have 3 amazing children, 2 unbelievable daughter-in-laws, and 2 grandchildren, which changes your entire life. When you start taking care of grandchildren, it makes you much, much younger and more tired, but it's wonderful. Most important, I have 150 young people who have aged out of the foster care system that I consider family. I consider my kids. I call them my kids. And I love them all dearly. And that has impacted my spiritual life. I think I've had faith since I was a young child. I went to Catholic school. I had nuns. And I remember thinking that's what I was going to do when I grew up. I was going to be a nun. Obviously, by being a teenager, that didn't happen. But Mother Teresa, Mary Magdalene, and Mary, Mother of Jesus, were women who I was intrigued with even when I was in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. The women, the moms, the ones who loved Jesus no matter what happened, and he loved and respected those women. So that was something that I remember from those years. I only was in Catholic school till 4th grade, moved to public school, but my faith grew through hard times. I don't know how anybody gets through hard times with work, with family, with the world today without that faith. And so my spiritual journey grew through hard times, learning that the more I leaned on Jesus, the better things got. Didn't mean hard times didn't happen. It meant I had someone helping me get through. So I think that's probably the best description of my spiritual journey. Every job I ever had, I brought the Lord with me to work on my sleeve, did not hide it. I worked in a prison, worked as a probation and parole officer, worked in a governor's office, ran Jefferson County Human Services, and then went to the federal government. And I never once even thought that I was doing something that I wasn't supposed to do, as some people will tell me. Separation of church and state. That never registered to what that meant or didn't mean. So I always just wore my faith. And with that, wearing the faith, there were times when I'd be with somebody who'd gotten out of prison and I'd say, "Can I pray for you a second?" Never realizing that was unusual. And so that's how my spiritual journey moved. As you know, during sometimes you're more spiritual and sometimes you're less spiritual and sometimes you think you just need to walk away, but then you always come back stronger. So my journey was just like that. And so many people can probably relate to it.
You know, Lynn, in many ways, you've maybe already answered this next question I have, but how have you been serving the Lord as an adult?
You know, interestingly, I not much different than as I was a kid. I was that person in school who always defended the kid who was picked on, or the person in the wheelchair was my friend, or I would find individuals who were going through, they'd run away from home. They were using substances, they were drinking, and they were in middle school. So nothing changed when I grew up, so to speak, because I went to work in a prison and I hung around the same kind of people and then was a parole officer. Moving things forward with work and my adult life was just something that I knew I wanted to do. I knew I wanted everybody to experience that real joy that you get when you love Jesus.
Amen. Wow. Thank you. So you mentioned that you worked in health and human services in Jefferson County here on the west side of Denver, Colorado. And what were some highlights for you? As you're saying, serving Jesus as you did as a child, but now in that role, what were some highlights?
Now, we could do this all day if I talk about the highlights in Jefferson County. I was there 11 years. And I have to be honest, when I first went to Jefferson County and applied, it was on a dare. Friend of mine had called and said, why don't you apply for this job to be human service director? Because you might be able to try doing some things to bring a more conservative and Christian approach to human services. And I said, first of all, no one would hire me for that. It says you have to have had experience working with 500 staff or more. And so then this person said to me, you're just chicken. And I went, ooh, ouch. So I applied knowing I wouldn't get it. And as God does, he puts you in places that you are not completely comfortable. But my other biggest piece of human services, I am a social worker by trade. I have a master's in social work, but I've been in criminal justice all my life, working with offenders. And I firmly believed my caseload was the mental health caseload, the long-term offender caseload, and sex offender caseload. And the files were this big. And I kept thinking, if human services had only worked in the lives of those individuals that I was serving by being their probation or parole officer, there would be half the caseload. And so then I'm being asked to go serve in human services. And I'm thinking, let's talk ultimate failure of why do the poverty numbers keep going up? Why do the recidivism rates keep happening if we're doing what needs to be done? And I walked into that job with that thought in my mind. And it's interesting because when I first walked in, I saw the staff, wonderful people, but the fatigue and they were so tired and they just were struggling to serve the most vulnerable people, babies that have been seriously harmed every single day. And they had to just do the rules and regulations, and they couldn't really fight for the impact or the success for these individuals. As long as they were compliant, they were okay. You get out of that compliance of rules and regulations and lawsuits could happen or other things could happen. But impact of success would even happen more if you're not worried about crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and you're worried about looking people in the eyes, remembering their names, faces, not cases. You're not just a number to people. And so that was my determination, was to change the culture, to remember that every person who walks in was made in God's image, and every person that walks in needs to feel the dignity of being a daughter or a son of a king. And that's not what happens.
One of the things that we need to find, Lynn,
yes, sir,
is the pill that you took to get you to have that attitude. It's just so hard to get people. I mean, listening to you, it's just a wonder how that happened to you, how that sort of grew up in you. And how do we get to repeat that with other people,
And that empathy, I do think everyone is born with it. I think hard times toughen us up, and you forget that you can do that. And I learned the hard way. I was so shy when I was young. Hard to believe some days, but I would stay under the desks in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade rather than sit in a desk at school and participate. And the nuns let me do that because I would throw a fit if I had to be with people. They didn't make me go out for a recess, and gym was really hard for me. So when you're that intimidated and shy, the biggest thing I learned was if I just threw a smile on my face, people could ignore me and just kind of let me do what I'm doing. So my smile, which then always impacts your heart, which then impacts your mind, was my protection. But then I found out that smiling at people that were going through hard times really brought light to their lives. And one case, and I know you asked about some of the things with Jefferson County, but one probation case where I went into somebody's house early in the morning. I always tried to do really tough areas in the morning while anybody who was dangerous was still passed out or sleeping. And one young man just said to me, "You need to go now." And I smiled and said, "Oh, no, I'm fine." He said, "No, you need to go." And he walked me to my car and we're chatting and I'm making sure he's doing what he needed to do. And as soon as I pulled out, there was a shooting in the parking lot. And I believe from the bottom of my heart that my smile, my caring for him made him say, "You need to be safe. You need to get out of here. I'll explain later." And it wasn't quite that easy because I was like, "No, I'm fine." But those are the kind of things that when you show your love and Jesus shines through you, you are protected in some tough situations. And I firmly believe that wherever I've gone, and I also believe if you get a job offer that is comfortable, it's not of Jesus. I mean, that's one thing. But if it's tough and you've got that pit in your stomach going, "What am I doing?" then you know the Lord is calling you to do that. And he will qualify you. We all hear that all the time. He doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. So that's really critical. But back to Jefferson County. One of the things that I was extremely proud of is that we took the 400 families at Head Start who are 100% of poverty and all of their children. And we asked for volunteers who wanted to work themselves out of poverty, trying things that had never been done. And we started with 13 people. And my favorite story, which I won't go into because it's a long one, but it was just, I interviewed a woman and I said, "Why do you want to try this?" And she said, "I want life better for my children than for myself." And I said, "Well, what about you?" And she was a heavy woman. And she said, "No one's ever asked me that before. They only care about my kids, but nobody said what could happen for me." And she thought a minute and she said, "I want to be on the show The Biggest Loser." And all I kept thinking in my head was, I didn't learn anything about that in social work school, but let's see what we can do. And we decided that we were going to, in Jefferson County, with the collaboration and the pulling together of the libraries, of the sheriff's office, of the police department, of all the cities, of everybody in Jefferson County, we were going to all focus on eradicating poverty in the county. So each person I talked to was part of that effort to show that in a county where it's middle class primarily, it's large, 500,000 people plus, we can, in a joint effort, move people from the poverty, which cost taxpayers far more than this effort was going to cost. And we pulled together everybody, including churches. And we were able to move individuals. This young woman ultimately had an experience. She got a personal trainer from the mayor's office. We got childcare. She did not do well at that time because the personal trainer had been a former military person, and him pushing her triggered her. We did not know she had had assaults in her past. So from that, he found out she needed nutrition. We got her into counseling. She actually beat me in a 5K. She lost a ton of weight. And she was able to put a degree together and get her degree. And now she's working full time, doing great. Her kids are graduated. But back in those days, people took one look at her and said, you are not trying. And she said, "I walk up 3 flights of stairs. So I buy the least heavy things that I can carry up the stairs, and that's chips and whatever else." In addition to that, they told her she was a terrible mother from the schools. She wanted her kids tested because they were acting out in school. And they kept saying it's just she's poor parenting. Ultimately, we did go get the kids tested. They both skipped 2 grades. So they were so bright. They were so bored. But by coming together with the community to say, let's help each person in their way with their dignity, we were able to also save those kids. And now we've had, I know it's been over 1,000 people plus that have moved up and out of poverty, have their own houses. In fact, there's one young lady that's working for a congressman in DC right now, but she was sleeping on the streets with their kids before. I mean, it's just things that happen. You have to see the faces. But the second most important part of this was we stressed quality education. It's not okay to not have the highest quality of education in low-income neighborhoods. It has to be there. So that pulling the community together around human services and the education system made things so much easier for the staff on both sides. And so
Yeah.
we did that and it's still going. It's still going. I'm
Mm,
just not as involved. At the same time, we started the Power of Partnership. So we
mm,
had over 100 churches wrapping around all of the people that came into our building
mm.
needing help, and we were able to get non-governmental supports to wrap around them while our case managers did their jobs. And
Hmm.
I truly believe that the Power Partnership, we call it POP, and they
Yeah.
also work closely with schools,
Hmm.
really made a difference in this effort to move people out of poverty. Because without
Yeah.
them and without God in the center of both of these,
Right. Right.
I don't know where we would have been, but it didn't happen. We had God in the center and so many people. And like I said, that these efforts are still going. I'm not involved at all. And yet people keep coming back and saying, Lynn, do you remember when you challenged me to go back to school, to go to see a doctor, to get my teeth
Yeah.
fixed?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's 20 or 15 years later.
Yeah.
So those are two highlights of Jefferson County.
Lynn, I don't know that this podcast of an hour is not long enough. You'd have so many stories all day. But I love what you said. Kind of your short summary sentence epitomizes what you just said: is faces, not cases. That you
Mhm.
see people and the needs they have and what they can become and their potential. But then, Lynn, you had the opportunity to influence even more people when you moved into a role in the federal government in Washington, D.C. Give us a highlight or so of your time while you were there.
What an honor to be chosen by the president to become the assistant secretary for the Administration for Children and Families in the Department of Health and Human Services. But Health and Human Services, we always joke there were two HHS. There was the little h that was usually the human service side, and the big H that everybody paid attention to, the health side. What's going on
Yeah.
with health? And so I always said I have the little h, but I also have always thought and have prayed. I think these were Esther moments for me to go to DC at that
Yeah.
time. I had to
Mm.
be Senate confirmed. So it took me a while to get in. I got in, and there were a lot of children coming over the border as unaccompanied children. And first thing I was told is, we have to make sure these children are taken care of, find out how they're getting over. What are we going to do? Do we have shelters? Do we have beds? What is our care? And
Mm.
the secretary was very serious about, we do have to take care of the children. That is
Yeah.
something. Not invite them in 24/7, but take care of them once they get here. So that was my job. George
Wow.
Floyd died, and we had Black Lives Matter, and that was
Yeah.
happening at the same time. And then, as you all know, then we had COVID. My
Yeah.
office was responsible for the repatriation of individuals from other countries to come back to the US. We didn't know enough about COVID, and so we were having to bring them here, isolate them here, which didn't make anybody happy, make sure they were isolated long enough so they didn't bring COVID to the others in the country. And so all of this was happening during the time that I was there. In addition, I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I have 2.5 years to really get things done. And what can we do? And I looked at two stats. 62% of kids are removed from their families because of consequences of poverty. Here we go back to my Jefferson County training.
Right.
Poverty.
Wow.
And they're not because of poverty, but consequences of poverty. Mom loses her job. She starts to get worried. She's a single mom. Then she's starting to not be able to pay for her house. She's going to lose her house. She starts taking some drugs for her depression, and it
Wow.
just snowballs from there. The community could have been involved at the very beginning when they saw that
Right.
the lawn was no longer being mowed, or they saw that the kids weren't showing up at school. The church
Right.
community, the
Right.
nonprofit community, the neighbors could have
Yeah.
had a huge impact before the
Right.
system comes in and says, it looks like your children are being neglected, remove the
Good.
children. Now you have to
Right.
go through all these things to try to get them back. So that
Right.
was a priority. The next piece was 127,000 children were sitting after parental rights were terminated in federal systems, in group homes and foster homes, and not getting their forever home. And some came in at age 2 and were there for 16 years and then age out. Some had 30 moves, some had 5 moves. And so
Oh my God.
I thought that I'm that person that goes to a party and people say, what do you do? And I kind of just spill out all the bad things about human services, about hunger and homelessness and broken kids and parents and drugs and you name it. And I'm never invited back to the parties. So what I decided on
Wow.
this note was, we're going to pick 2 things for the country to focus on. Those 2 pieces, the front end And those kids that are waiting, if 127,000 kids found forever homes, we could forever reinvest those funds that are used in keeping them in the government system to do the prevention work on the front end. So that was called the All-In Challenge, supported by President Trump and First Lady Trump. I told them, I'm going to talk to every governor and ask them to be all in for America's kids. And so I started with the Democratic Party. It makes sense to me that when you're calling people and saying, hi, I'm from the Trump administration, and you're talking to a Democrat governor, that you want to make sure you've got support on that front. So I talked to the Democratic governors. No one was not all in. And then I talked to all our Republican friends, and they were all in. And then we showed them the numbers. You've got 30,800 kids just waiting. Here's what it costs you for your caseworkers to see them every month and to do the paperwork. And here's what you could reinvest if you did this. And everybody jumped on, and we were doing this and making it happen. The president did an executive order about child welfare and integrating church and nonprofits into that. First Lady Trump, Melania, oh my gosh, she was so wonderful on this issue. And she just loved these kids. And so she would meet with the aged out kids and ask them questions and send them pictures that they took with her. And so it was really exciting to see we have an issue that we can do something about. Everybody in the country's in, and we can move it. And then we lost the election and I came home. So it was a wonderful, incredible experience that I would never, ever not do. And it was hard 24/7. But it was working for a president that cared about hunger, homelessness, poverty, things that people don't realize. He didn't want those things to be brushed under the rug. He wanted everything to come out from under the rug, and then let's just do something. And that's my style. I love that. So it was a great opportunity for me, and I was working for the right boss.
Wow. It's great. It's great.
So Lynn, I was going to ask you what led to you leaving that influential role, and you already said that the administration you were part of was voted out. So what did you do then? After having such an impactful role, what did you do then?
That was probably it was a hard time because also, as so many people know, January 6th happened, and there were all these accusations going back and forth, and a lot of staff went home because between COVID and January 6th. And so there wasn't any real closure when I came home. There were very few people left in my office at that time. And I came home, and so it was a whirlwind and no time to really think, oh my gosh, I'm not coming back to my office. And I had an apartment. My husband stayed home. So I had a little apartment. It was on the wharf. I loved it. I called it a chick pad. It was all white. And it was just where you could pray and just be by yourself. And my husband would come, and I used to joke that, this is not big enough for the two of us. It was a small apartment. But as he and I drove home, I'm starting to think, what am I going to do? I don't go back to my previous job. I don't know that I would want to. I want to continue to serve the Lord, but I don't know what that looks like. And I'm on my knees when I got home and crying and saying, Lord, what do I do? How do I serve? How do I keep some of these good things happening? And I heard so clearly that I was not meant to stay in DC. I was meant to meet people who can help me influence how we care for his children. And that was striking. And I thought about that. In the seat I was in, I met a lot of influential people.
Right.
But I'm thinking his children. Lord, what do you mean by that? And when I met with governors, I had asked each governor to introduce me to 10 young people who had aged out of their system in their state. And because these kids will tell the truth, they're not in the system anymore. They have nothing to lose. And so I met hundreds of kids. And I'm thinking, but they're not kids, they were adults. And so I'm praying and I'm looking up to the sky going, seriously, Lord, kids? Seriously? Within an hour, a young man called me and he said, Madam Secretary, I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but you came to Indiana and I was going to Indiana State and COVID happened and now they've closed down the dorms. I went back to my foster mom, but she said, you're not in foster care anymore. And COVID, don't even come through the door.
Wow.
I'm going to get in my car and I am going to drive to LA to remake myself. But I remember you said you were from Colorado. Can I stop at your house on the way? And I'm thinking, and my husband's looking at me like, what? And I said, absolutely. So I hang up and Lance said to me, do you remember this young man? I said, I think so. Maybe. Yes. No, I don't know. So he did come, spent more than just one night and stayed for a while and shared his story and his hurts and his his passion and how he wanted to finish school. But it's like once he had gotten into foster care, he was moved and moved and moved. And so this was just one more thing that he packed up his trash bag of things and took it to the next thing. I went up into his room after he left, and there was stuff still there. So I called him and I said to him, Sean, do you want me to send this stuff to you? And he said, no, Lynn, I'll get it when I come home.
Ooh.
Lance looked at me and said, I think you just got adopted. And I said, oh, no, honey, we got adopted. So what that led to, and I'll do this quickly, was that he was going to come back and go hiking with my son. I had been in touch with some other young people who had aged out, who they never had vacations. They didn't have sleepovers when they were in foster care. And they said, can we come to Colorado and go hiking and do like a vacation? So a small group of them were going to come meet Sean here, and they were going to go hiking and do a vacation sleepover. They also didn't have sleepovers. And when 25 young people showed up at our house in August, we were blowing up air mattresses. They were sleeping under the kitchen table. I put girls upstairs, guys downstairs. I'm looking around. I didn't know these kids. My husband didn't know these kids. My neighbors were awesome, as was our community churches. They all made food because food insecurity is a huge issue. And all of a sudden, I have all these kids here. They got to go fishing. They had s'mores every night. That's the number one thing they wanted was s'mores. They shared, they talked. There's stories I could tell you that would have you absolutely rolling over laughing. But like you said, we don't have all day. So we had all those kids, and we went to a church. We talked about what they would want for future. And one young man said to me, would you do this with just guys? And I said, do I look like a guy? And he said, no, Lynn, I am serious. So I said, let me pray on that. And I went and gave a speech in Oklahoma. Somebody had talked to me about, he said, I have this ranch on the border of Oklahoma and Kansas on your way home. It really wasn't on the way home, but that's okay. He said, would you stop there? I think you might be able to use it for some. Wow. So my husband and I went, and he threw us on horses. He didn't ask if we were horse people. He threw us on horses, and we went riding around. And I just heard again, this is your men's retreat. So out at Spring Valley Ranch, we had a men's retreat where about 20 young people or adults who had never been in the system, men, showed up. And then we had another 25 young people. At that time, they got to do things they never got to do growing up. They canoed, they four-wheeled, they shot ski, they did archery, they learned to tie a tie, they sang songs, they just did guy things. They learned how to treat a lady on a date. But there were maybe 3. And most of our friends who were there were people of faith. But we had to also remind them, so many of these young people are angry at God. Why did this happen to them? Why did their parents do this to them? Why did these things happen? So be careful of overpraising God when you first meet these young people. And so maybe 3 kids in that whole circle would say the word God or pray. And just last year, just to tell you how we've gone from there, we had some kids who said, we really would love to get together with other alumni and worship the Lord. I had a faith-based retreat in North Carolina. We invited 25 kids. If I'd had enough money, we could have had 45 kids. And 2 of them asked if we would baptize them in the hot tub.
Wow.
So from 3 to 25 could have been 45 and still moving because we just walk. We don't talk it. We walk as much like Jesus as we can because we don't want to scare away these kids. So we don't judge and we love hard. But that's how all in started, was just from Sean saying, can I come over? And then we did in Indiana, West Virginia, Georgia, Missouri. We're doing Michigan, hopefully Texas and Florida this year. So now we're growing. We have 200 kids, 25 to 200. But God is in the middle.
Well, Lynn, you in my introducing you, I said you're the president of All In Empowering Futures. And I think you're beginning to describe that. Maybe to ask the obvious question, what led you to do that? And then describe what All In Empowering Futures actually is.
So as you know, God spoke to us and told my husband and I, this is your mission instead of retiring. And we said, okay, Lord. And we said, yes. And I will tell you, about halfway through 2 years ago, I was absolutely struggling and I was tired and we had more and more kids coming, and I'm not a fundraiser. So I'm fundraising for these retreats so that all I wanted was for these kids to learn how to play, these alumni, these adults. I have 50-year-olds and I want them to learn to play hard. When I hear belly laughter, I know that they're ready for healing and to move to that next level. And we bring the moms and the kids and the boys, the moms and dads and the kids, because the moms weren't coming because they weren't going to leave their kids at home. So now we have kids, families, networks, and I invite like you all to just come. My husband says, until you see it, it's hard to describe because it's transformational. Totally different than anything I've ever done. I never did child welfare. I ran human services. But these young people have taught me more. That it's one of those things where you go, I wish I could have known this back when I was working in these systems. But they've taught me so much. And we've had them in financial peace. We have them learning all sorts of things. Hugh, the key question is what is all in? It's not a program. You can find a program that will help them with employment or help with housing or deal with a substance issue. We don't do that. I was blessed to know what's good going on in the United States. So and these kids are in 29 different states. They're not all Colorado. So if someone calls says, I'm really struggling with, I can dig in and make the phone calls and find what is going to help them. How are we going to help them from becoming homeless? And then we have a crisis fund. We have had to use a lot lately. In the last 2 years, kids with homelessness and unemployment and just struggles that we hadn't seen the first 2 years. So we do relationship. We do relationship well. When people come to our house, we have 2 rules we tell them is you come in, you're not a guest, your family. I will not wait on you. I will not always cook. There's food here. And we always make sure there's lots of food. And there's unlimited ice cream. You could eat it for breakfast if you want. We don't care. Those are our 2 rules.
I like that. I'm coming.
No, that's what everybody walks in the door and says, where's the ice cream? So we do that. But then with the team and with the groups, we talk about the real rules. There's only 2. You do not judge. Where these young people have been, whether they've been trafficked, whether they've been neglected, the stories are not stories you want to share. They're ugly. They're painful. And it's hard to believe these kids are sitting here having belly laughter in my house after you hear their stories. So we don't judge. And we will call each other on it if we catch judging. So will the kids now, the alumni. They'll say, I'm feeling judged. So we really are serious about that. The second piece is we love hard. I have a t-shirt that says hard to love harder. Jesus loved hard. So now you asked a question earlier, how has my spiritual life grown? It has grown more in the last 10 years than my first 50 years of life because loving harder, these kids will test you because they'll walk in the house and say, you're going to hate me in 6 months because I had 4 failed adoptions and nobody wanted me back. So I was in a detention facility and I say, bring it. And then they will try to make me not love them. And my husband and I together hold tight and we love hard. And we find all the reasons why we love them and all the reasons why in time, these bad behaviors and bad attitudes will stop. And we're seeing it. We see it. And we've seen more kids say, will you tell me about that Jesus guy you know? And it's like, okay, now you asked. It's so that's what All In does. And so we are growing. There's 20,000 kids who age out every year. We have 200. So how am I going to get to these 20,000? And then if we could impact the system, maybe we won't have any aging kids if we do it right.
Amen.
Well, Lynn, just to follow up, I love what you're saying. You focus on relationships. Again, it's the idea of faces, not cases. And I love that first story about the boy who came and he left some things there at your house because he said he called it home. Oh my goodness. What a powerful thing. But Lynn,
it was.
Before I ask you this next question, tell us about that special wall on your house.
I'm going to turn the camera a little bit. I think you might be able to see on this wall over here, every time somebody spends the night, they sign the wall. And it's my commitment that they will not sleep on the streets again. They are on my wall. I don't know what we're going to do if we ever move because we have to take the wall, but it's actually, we moved around the corner because we have so many signatures, but they really think that's special. And it is. It's something that it's a commitment. It's not a government piece of paper. It's a sign the wall in my house that you will always have a bed to sleep in. And he was here 2 weeks ago. He just showed up. Then they know the code to my house and he knocks on the door and he shows up. He goes, Mama Lynn, I'm here. Okay. Luckily, I always keep the rooms ready for who's showing up next. Last 2 weeks, we've had about 6 kids come and go in and out, just checking in. And
Wow.
we're blessed. We're so blessed. We've taught kids how to drive. We've taught kids, again, tying a tie, working on their cars, things that
Yeah.
my biological kids learned by watching dad.
Sure.
Now they're all watching Lance, the young people, because Lance, again, it's doing with is I'm working on the bathroom. Who's going to help me? And they learn
Right.
tools and they learn what we're doing. So it's been a really learning experience. My husband never did a social work thing. He worked for a city park rec and open space. And he is now more invested, I would say, probably than me. We were going to downsize our house to 2 bedrooms. The wall was a concern. And he kept saying to me at every house we looked at, well, where are the kids going to stay?
Wow.
So I knew we weren't going to move. And I knew that we're going to always have these rooms for the kids. And it's important. And others are following with what I'm doing. So there's other moms and dads out there now, and it's growing, which thank goodness for that. The Lord knows capacity. So
Yes.
it's good.
Goodness.
Lynn, I love your stories. And again, we believe that stories change lives because it changes people's worldview. But Lynn, tell us, what are some challenges you have been encountering now with All In Empowering Futures?
I think on probably just the professional level for me is the retreats cost money. And I fly kids to these retreats or they can't go because they don't have it.
Right.
They're hourly jobs, that kind of thing. And some have money, but some don't. So fundraising for me, because I think anybody who's done fundraising for a nonprofit knows it is not easy. And so I am often praying to the Lord to guide me on how to get it done. Every retreat we've done has been cared for. I have not had to take my retirement money yet. But it is God's money, right? So if that were to happen, it would happen. So that's my biggest challenge. What I'm seeing with the kids, the young people coming out, the anger when they leave and the struggle, so many programs that the government has for these young people, you have a income limit. So if you're you're 18 and you get a raise in your job, but then you start doing something else, you might make too much money to keep your housing. Well, you don't have enough money to pay for housing, or you could use your childcare because you're making a little bit too much. So we call that the cliff, and the cliff does impact it. But even in these foster care and aged out youth programs, common sense tells you that you're not doing a move to independence if you aren't allowed to make more money and to achieve. And then you're saying you're kind of keeping them down in itself. And I don't think it's intentional. It's just how our rules and laws have been written for social services forever. So the fact that these kids can get the help they need, but then they have to stay fairly low income in order to keep getting the investments. That's something that I think is a real challenge and something we need to work on and something that many people in DC today are working on. So that's the good news, that people realize that they're starting to see it, and hopefully we'll get moving quicker. The other piece is homelessness. Homelessness is a huge issue right now. Unemployment that I'm noticing is taking longer. 50% of kids who are in foster care do not graduate high school.
So my
3% will go to college of those that do, and 1% will graduate. I am so proud that many of our kids are going to college. We're working on GEDs and diplomas. I'm a big diploma person instead of GED, but if that's what you have to do, we do it. And we are helping with, you heard me say in the beginning, quality education is a way out of poverty. And we're making sure these kids are forever learners. We have 10 alumni right now taking Financial Peace University, the Dave Ramsey course. And we are plugging them into places. Every other Monday, I meet with the women and we do Zoom calls and we talk about whatever subject they come up with. Last night was self-care. And so they lead it, I guide it. And we have other friends of alumni is what we call it, because they've told me they don't like the word mentors. So we have friends of alumni. I want to tell you one thing. One young man who met a friend of alumni at the men's retreat, every Sunday, they get a phone call together. One's in DC and the other is in Chicago. And it's a check-in. It's not, so are you meeting your goals? It was, how was your week? That young man who aged out of foster care, he has taken his LSATs and he is going to be going to law school. He's been admitted to 3 schools.
Wow.
That is what happens with the power of relationship that keeps people moving forward. And I could go on for days on successes like that. kids who have gotten married, they're fostering now, they bought their own houses, they have a bank account, they have a Roth IRA. I mean, the things these kids do because they've got these friends of alumni who guide them. It's pretty
Yes,
exciting.
yes,
They're getting
yes.
their driver's license. The biggest things we can't find, the challenges, they don't have their birth certificates. They don't learn to drive while they're in foster care. So they get out and then they're expected to get a job, but they don't even know how to drive a car and they can't get insurance. So those kind of challenges that are so common sense are real. And we do help them work through that.
Lynn, you're describing, it sounds like it's still a major problem across our country. And I guess, how would you tell the people that are going to be listening to you, what systemic changes need to happen in order to address what you're describing?
I love that question. There are many, many groups working on that right now. I'm involved in a few myself. And the systemically, one, I don't feel there's a sense of urgency. It's interesting. It's like somebody comes in, well, now you've got 200 cases throughout this office. So we'll get to that one when we can get to this. The crisis obviously gets dealt with, but then you're always dealing with the crisis. And then this young person goes into a home, well, you need that bed for this new crisis. And then you move this kid over here. So the continuity of common sense, there's that critical nature of dealing with crisis that you sometimes forget about that kiddo that's doing really good. And then you also forget, as I said, there's the chance to, once parental rights are terminated, where are the churches? Where are the faith nonprofit groups with the faith-based organizations that can help us find homes for all these kids? But also remembering we've had huge religious liberty issues. And so for 4 years, you cannot place a child with a family that was Christian. And then there were for years before that, it was, let's push the Christianity. I'm saying everybody's needed. Everybody can care for children. And there shouldn't be, again, the one thing that I tell people not to, this judgment. We need everyone to love these kids. And that's what we should do best. And we should not strip the dignity of a child who believes they are LGBTQ. And we should not strip the dignity of a child who has been in custody for criminal charges. Judgment is not going to help us solve this problem. And so we need to love through it. And the country can love through it. They just need to believe they can and not do a million governmental rules about how to love.
Right.
Wow.
Amen.
It makes sense. And yet we don't always do that, which makes sense.
Right.
I'm going to ask you can you tell one more success story? You probably could tell 45,000 success stories, but tell another success story so that the people listening, they will not forget.
Oh boy, we had a young man who, I'm going to throw 2 in. Is that okay, Hugh?
Of course, but not 3.
Not 3. A young man and his 2 sisters that were adopted. And then they were moved from where they were adopted from to another state and then locked in a room for 13 years. And during that time, they were not fed well. It was not a pleasant thing, to put it bluntly. And they escaped at age 16. They ended up going into the foster care system. And then the youngest sister, because they were separated in the system and they'd always been, 3 peas in a pod, hung herself on the monkey bars. But these other 2 kids, the twins, the male came to my house and you could tell that it was like he was caged up, like a caged up lion. He when he gets nervous, he paces, didn't really know how to hold the silverware like he should have. And today he runs for office. He's on boards. He's successful. His sister's the one who ran our phone call, facilitated the call last night. So when you think of the horrors, and I shared that because I was told by someone that I have several young people who are some of the worst stories in the country. I don't look at that. I look at the blessings of what could be. And then the other one, I love this because this young lady was so shy. She came to a retreat and she said, I'm just going to stay for a couple hours. I said, okay. And then as she stayed the night, and the next day she participated in the tug of war. The goal was to get Lance into a mud pit. So Lance gets covered with mud and they're laughing and they're fishing and we're playing. It's in West Virginia, capture the flag in the middle of the night. We do a candle ceremony after every retreat. And we say, what is the thorn that you are going to leave behind here? What's the bud that you have the potential to bud into? And what's the rose you already are? And this young lady said,
Mm.
I wasn't going to stay. I don't like talking to people. And I've got the mic now in front of my face. I don't know how this is happening, but I know that I'm meant to stay in this chosen family and do something to make a difference for those that have been through the same experience as me. She works for an agency that hired her to be a peer counselor for other aged out kids. She travels the country now. She speaks all the time. She's an unbelievable writer that she writes press things and she writes for me because she's so good. And she would never have stepped into that next step of believing you can put that mic in front of your face. That doesn't mean your stomach's not knots. It means that your story is going to bring healing to others. And so every day she brings healing to others because we shoved a mic in her face. I do that all the time to people, but she's just one. But those are the kind of things that we see. And my husband said to his boss, asked him about our nonprofit, and he said he never has a bad day because when you think of what these kids have been through, we can't complain. There's nothing so bad that happens in our lives that these young kids haven't been through and are now sharing their belly laughter with us and love and calls and jokes and signatures on a wall. And that's what everybody can see through this. It's really powerful.
Lynn, listening to you, again, one of the questions we have is, what counsel can you give to Christians to help them understand this aging out of foster problem, but then to help them understand what they can do? And I'm sure there'll be people saying, but I'm not a Lynn Johnson. What can I do? I'm not sure I want to have kids write their names on a wall in my house. What counsel can you give to people to say, you don't have to be like me, you need to be like yourself, but what counsel do you want to give to the people who are listening?
Absolutely. And I shared a little bit of my first jobs where I was in a prison and I worked with offenders. God knew where I was going to be today. And so all those jobs, going to a governor's office, learning how to do policy, going to Jefferson County, learning human services when I didn't want to, and then ending up running human services for the country and then coming home and serving the children well. That was a journey. So that was the intent for the Lord, my purpose. Everybody is not intended to do that purpose. God has a purpose for every single person. And James 127 ministry, everybody can care for children, everybody. And so they can look and say, we have people who find gifts so we can do packages for children at Christmas time, or people who have a big warehouse in the back of their yard and they put furniture there so that when I get someone into a house and we need a table, I know who I can call, or just to help with tutoring or financial management. We have so many one-on-ones helping people with bad spending habits that, all of us could use. And so we don't need the exception of a journey that was for this. We need the talent that God gave each and every person to wrap around these kids. And it's wearing our faith on our sleeves. It's what you all do every day with all of the different groups to say, do not put your light in a bucket. It is critical. And that's what we need everybody to do. We need more people to look someone in the eye and say, I'm not judging you. I have been kicked out of churches because I took my kids in and they looked scary. And pastors have said, I don't know if you should be here. So training up pastors, learning that that's not what we've got here. And even if we did, they still deserve to be in a church and have a community. So being able to spread the word and teach and guide and love, and everybody can do that. Everybody can make, oh my gosh, we got homemade cinnamon rolls when they were at my house. Anybody can make something. And I got the recipe and still can't make them as good as they were when they were brought for the kids. So that's the goal.
And as we're coming to the end of our time, something we had talked about earlier is the importance of collaboration. And it seems like you were touching on that right here at the end, that everybody can help in, a variety of ways. Lynn, how could people get in contact with All In Empowering Futures? And I know, again, you live in Denver, Colorado, but as you said, you're all over the United States. How could people make contact with the organization?
So allinempoweringfutures.org. Go to our website. There's places where you can, and I would encourage you to watch the videos. It gives you even a better idea of who these kids are, what they do that makes you just go, oh, I want to know them. But watch the videos, have Kleenex. Some of it's heart-wrenching, but do that. And there's a sign up that there's a way that you can connect with us so that you can say, I want to help you with the Michigan retreat or the Florida retreat or the Texas retreat, or I have an idea for a retreat for next year. And we need that because we're small and mighty. It's my husband, myself, and one director, and then volunteers. So we are growing, and I hate the thought that kids are not able to participate because we don't have help.
Again, can you give us the website address once more?
Yep. All in empoweringfutures.org.
Great.
And then we have a golf tournament on July 31st. If you're in Colorado, we would love to have you. Colorado cornhole tournament, actually in September in Arizona. And our kids love playing cornhole. They didn't have those Sunday afternoon family things. So come to the Arizona cornhole tournament. Those are both fundraisers. And then watch our videos and just remember to be bold in your faith, because that's what we do. I wanted to quit, and someone said, has God released you? What are you talking about, Lord? Why do I have to be released? I'm tired and I'm okay. That was 2 years ago. So I'm glad I didn't quit, and I'm glad someone called me out, and I'm glad the Lord knew that I wasn't ready to quit yet.
Me too. You're doing a wonderful work, really. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
The stories are just, they're hard, okay, but they're wonderful. Okay, so thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
No, you're so welcome.
Well, our time is just about over, but any final thought you want to mention, Lynn?
I would love to tell you all of you that are listening, that first, God bless you, and be bold in your faith in all that you do. Not just things like this, but as you cook dinner at night or as you work in the yard, love others well, live a life that honors our Lord and Savior all the time, not just on Sundays. And as you enter the kingdom, the Lord will say, well done, good and faithful servant. It's not easy, but I'm telling you, it is so, so worth it. Thank you.
Oh,
And this has been delightful. And as we're closing now, I just want to say thank you to all of our listeners for joining us for this Intersection Faith, Work, and Life podcast with Lynn Johnson and her amazing stories. Thank you, Lynn, so much. And we ask you to go to our website, www.citiesprojectglobal.com, or to LinkedIn or to Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe to our podcasts. And if you have found our podcasts helpful, please let us know through a review. But again, we want to say, Lynn, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a huge delight.
Thank you. It's an honor to be asked.
It's a great thing to have you with us. The stories are wonderful, and I know they'll touch everyone's heart.
Thank you.